Here she goes again. Hide your face, hide your neck, duck your head, wear an NFL football helmet when you are playing in a game versus DJonai Carrington. Fresh off of clotheslining, a Kane and Undertaker clothesline from hell that she delivered to Sophie Cunningham, this girl is right back on the court, hitting people upside the head once.
Hands up, swipe for the ball with our right hand while poking the player in the eye with the left hand.
The eyeball. We're poking eyeballs out again. Is that what we're doing? We're eye gouging again?
Something has changed around DJonai Carrington, and this time, fans are asking a much bigger question. Just days after her explosive confrontation with Sophie Cunningham put her under a massive spotlight, Carrington was back on the court, and two more controversial plays immediately reignited the debate. One involved contact around Cecilia Zandalicini's face. Another came against Tiffany Hayes. Neither moment was ruled a flagrant, but the timing was impossible for fans to ignore. Was this simply aggressive defense going too far? Or is Carrington developing a reputation that the WNBA can no longer overlook?
I tried to tell y'all. I tried. This girl is not going to stop until she takes somebody out the league. This girl will not stop until she ends somebody's career. DJonai Carrington, once again, with another dirty foul in less than a week. In just a couple of days apart from each other. A couple of days apart from the Sophie Cunningham hard foul. You have Mrs. Eye Poke. Mrs. Flagrant foul. I'm going to grab your head. I'm going to hit your head upside your head. Knock you out the air. Mrs. I'm going to pull your hair. Mrs. I'm going to whack you on the back of your head. Mrs. Long nailed, sharp knobbed fingertips. DJonai Carrington strikes again.
And after everything that happened with Sophie, the latest footage may have changed the conversation completely. The first thing that needs to be understood is why these latest plays are getting so much attention. By themselves, a single awkward defensive sequence in basketball can be explained in several ways.
And then she put both hands up right after. But that's DJonai.
Yeah, I gouged another white girl. Yeah, I gouged another white girl while wearing your Sophie Cunningham wig. I am officially... Hey, this ain't Clerks 2, but I'm taking back Sophie Cunningham's hair. I'm taking it back. You got Sophie Cunningham's hair on while you're poking the white girls in the eyeballs.
Players move quickly, arms collide, and sometimes a defender reaches for the ball and makes contact with an opponent instead. But the situation surrounding DJonai Carrington is different because these new moments arrived almost immediately after one of the most talked about incidents involving her this season. Against Sophie Cunningham, Carrington's hard contact during a fast break opportunity resulted in a flagrant 2 foul and an ejection after officials reviewed the play. Cunningham went down, emotions escalated, and suddenly a routine basketball matchup had become a major league-wide discussion. That incident became important because it created a completely different level of attention around Carrington's defensive style. Instead of people talking primarily about her ability to pressure the ball, force turnovers, and defend multiple positions, the conversation shifted toward physicality and where the line should be drawn.
They go on to defend her, the story, the narrative that she's not a dirty player. She makes plays like this all the time. I put together a little clip of DJ Carrington, who is definitely one of the dirtiest players in the WNBA. I don't know if we can roll it, but she's taken her long fingernails. She's scratched Caitlin Clark's eyes out. She's had multiple instances of chasing people down from behind, trying the same swat and smashing them in the head and causing mini fights. She pulled another girl's hair. I don't know if we'll get to that clip in a second when she's falling. Totally dirty play. This is not a skin color thing. She has a history of making dirty plays, and it's fine. The NBA, you can be...
Then came the next game. Carrington returned to the floor, and two separate sequences quickly became the focus of social media discussions.
You have a photo from the flagrant 2 on DJonai Carrington against Sophie Cunningham where she proceeded to go into the locker room and tweet white privilege after being thrown out of the game. I'm not going to comment on that situation, but I will say this. This is a flagrant 2. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, don't matter. This is a flagrant. I mean, she clotheslined her. What more do you want? So this looks very bad. It just shows that the WNBA is nowhere near where they need to be professionally. Because again, This is a clothesline. It's flagrant 2.
In one play, she was defending Cecilia Zandalicini on the perimeter. Carrington appeared to reach toward the basketball with one arm while her other arm moved upward. Contact was made around Zandalicini's face. The play immediately drew reactions because of where the contact landed. Was Carrington trying to make a legitimate defensive play? That is certainly the interpretation some viewers will have. Defensive players are constantly reaching, swiping, and contesting shots. But the question becomes more complicated when the hand that isn't directly involved with the ball also makes contact with an opponent's face. And that is exactly why the replay became so important. Slow-motion footage can make an ordinary basketball sequence look dramatically different from what it feels like in real time. A movement that takes less than a second suddenly becomes several separate actions. The initial defensive position, the reach toward the ball, the movement of the second arm, and then the resulting contact. Later in the same game, another controversial sequence involving Tiffany Hayes added even more fuel to the discussion. Hayes attacked the basket, and Carrington moved with her on the defensive play. As Hayes went toward the rim, contact occurred around her upper body and face area. Again, the debate wasn't simply whether contact happened. Everyone watching the replay could see that something happened. The real disagreement was about intent, positioning, and whether the contact should have resulted in additional punishment. Officials did not call either sequence a flagrant foul. That detail matters, because while fans can watch a replay and reach their own conclusions, an official ruling is still the formal judgment made during the game. If the league did not classify those moments as flagrant, then calling them automatically intentional would go beyond what the ruling itself establishes. But fans were not looking at these plays in isolation. They were looking at them through the lens of what had happened only days earlier with Cunningham. That is where the controversy became much larger. One controversial play can disappear from the news cycle quickly. Two questionable sequences in another game, immediately following a major ejection, create a completely different conversation. And this is where Carrington's reputation becomes part of the story. She is not an unknown player trying to figure out professional basketball. She has established herself as an athletic and physical defender. Her ability to pressure opponents is one of the reasons she has remained valuable to teams. That makes the situation complicated, because the same aggressiveness that can make Carrington effective defensively can also create moments where her physical approach becomes controversial. There is a very important distinction here. Being an aggressive defender does not automatically make someone a dirty player. Those two descriptions are not interchangeable. A defender can play with intensity, fight through screens, challenge drives, and attack passing lanes without deliberately trying to injure someone. At the same time, repeated dangerous contact deserves examination regardless of whether the player intended to cause harm. That distinction is what gets lost whenever social media turns a basketball debate into a simple argument between two sides. One side sees a defender competing for the ball. The other side sees repeated contact that should not be happening. The truth can sometimes be somewhere in between. And that is why the latest footage matters. It gives viewers another opportunity to examine what actually happened instead of relying entirely on the emotions surrounding the Sophie Cunningham incident. Because if Carrington is going to be judged, the strongest argument should come from the plays themselves. Look at the positioning. Look at where the ball is. Look at the defender's hands. Look at what happens immediately before and after contact. Then ask the most important question. Was this simply aggressive basketball? Or is there a pattern developing that deserves greater attention from the league? That question is now following Carrington into every game. And with the controversy already growing, the next part of the story takes us back to the incident that started the entire storm. The Sophie Cunningham play that changed the way fans began viewing Carrington's physical defense. To understand why the latest incidents involving DJonai Carrington have created such a strong reaction, we have to go back to the Sophie Cunningham play. The game was already moving at a fast pace when Cunningham broke toward the basket. She had an opportunity near the rim, and Carrington was chasing the play from behind. Then came the contact that changed the entire night. Carrington made a hard defensive move toward Cunningham, but instead of simply challenging the shot, contact was made around Cunningham's upper body and head area. Cunningham went down, and immediately the atmosphere changed. At first, the officials assessed a flagrant 1 foul. That decision alone generated debate. But after the play was reviewed, the foul was upgraded to a flagrant 2, ending Carrington's night with an ejection. That distinction is important because a flagrant 2 ruling is not simply another personal foul. It means officials determined the contact crossed a much more serious threshold under the league's rules. For viewers watching the replay, the most debated elements were the direction of Carrington's movement, the amount of force involved, and the fact that Cunningham was vulnerable while attempting the play. And once the ejection happened, the story moved beyond basketball. Cunningham was visibly upset after the contact, and players from both sides became involved as emotions rose. Teammates had to intervene before the confrontation could escalate. That reaction became part of the larger conversation because Cunningham's response was interpreted by many viewers as evidence of just how severe the initial contact felt in the moment. But there was another layer. After leaving the game, Carrington posted a message referencing white privilege. That post immediately became a separate controversy. Instead of people discussing only whether the foul deserved a flagrant 2, the conversation suddenly expanded into questions about race, officiating, and whether Carrington believed the punishment had been influenced by Cunningham being white. Carrington later indicated that the post was not meant in the way many people had interpreted it. Regardless of what the original intention was, the timing made the situation extremely difficult to separate from the ejection. And that is an important lesson in sports controversies. Sometimes what happens immediately after an incident becomes almost as significant as the incident itself. The basketball play could have remained a debate about defensive contact. Instead, the social media reaction turned it into something much bigger. Fans picked sides. Commentators dissected the replay. Clips spread across social media. And suddenly Carrington's previous controversial moments were being brought back into the discussion. That is where the Caitlin Clark incident entered the conversation again. Carrington had previously been involved in an eye contact controversy with Clark during the 2024 playoffs. At the time, Clark herself indicated that she did not believe the contact was intentional. That point should not be ignored. If the player involved says she did not believe it was deliberate, it becomes difficult to use that single incident as proof of intent. But it can still be discussed as part of the broader question about defensive technique. And that distinction is crucial. There is a difference between saying, this player intentionally tried to hurt someone, and saying, this player has been involved in several controversial defensive contacts that deserve closer examination. The second statement does not require us to read someone's mind. It simply asks us to examine the evidence. That is exactly where the Carrington debate currently stands. Her supporters can point to her defensive role and argue that physical basketball naturally produces contact. Her critics can point to multiple controversial sequences and argue that aggressive defense should not become an excuse for careless contact around the head and face. Both sides have something to argue, but the league has an additional responsibility. The WNBA has to establish a consistent standard for dangerous contact. Players need to know what is acceptable. Coaches need to know what will be punished. Officials need to apply the same standard regardless of which player is involved. And fans need to believe that the rules are being enforced consistently. That is why the Cunningham incident became such an important reference point when the later plays happened. The timing was almost impossible to ignore. Carrington had just been ejected from a high-profile game after a serious foul. Then she returned to action only days later and became involved in 2 more controversial sequences. Even if neither later play was classified as flagrant, fans were already watching Carrington differently. The question was no longer simply, was that one foul intentional? Now it became, how many controversial moments should happen before the league takes a closer look at the player's defensive approach? That is a much bigger question. And it is also where online commentary can go too far. Calling every physical play intentional is not analysis. Neither is pretending every controversial play is automatically harmless. The better approach is to examine each incident independently, then look at whether the larger pattern tells us something meaningful. Carrington is an athletic defender. She has the speed to recover, the length to disrupt passing lanes, and the physicality required to defend multiple positions. Those qualities are valuable, but defensive talent also comes with responsibility. The more important a defender becomes, the more attention every physical mistake receives. And when the same type of controversy repeatedly surrounds a player, the reputation can become almost impossible to separate from the performance. That is the position Carrington now finds herself in. The Cunningham incident put the spotlight on her. The later incidents kept that spotlight on. And now every new defensive sequence is going to receive more scrutiny than it probably would have before. But there is still one major question left. Is this simply a case of an extremely physical defender repeatedly finding herself on the wrong side of difficult basketball plays? Or are the latest incidents evidence that something about Carrington's defensive technique needs to change? Because that answer could determine what happens next, not only for Carrington but for the Chicago Sky and the league itself. Now the story reaches the point where this is no longer just about one foul, one game, or even one player. The bigger issue is accountability. DJonai Carrington has already established herself as a valuable defensive player. Her athleticism, intensity, and ability to guard different positions are obvious reasons teams continue to trust her with major minutes. But that value also creates a difficult question for any coaching staff. How much physicality is too much? Because a defender can be extremely aggressive without crossing the line. The problem begins when aggressive defense repeatedly produces contact around vulnerable areas such as the head, neck, or face. That is why the latest incidents are receiving so much attention. Fans are not just looking at what happened during one possession. They are comparing the newest footage with the Cunningham incident and older moments that have remained part of Carrington's public reputation. And once a reputation develops, every new play gets judged through that lens. That can be unfair to a player. But it can also be dangerous for everyone involved if a legitimate pattern is ignored simply because every individual incident can be explained away. This is where the WNBA has to be consistent. If officials determine that a play is legal, fans may disagree, but the decision is still part of the game. If officials determine that contact crosses the line, the punishment needs to be applied consistently. The league cannot have one standard for one player and another standard for someone else. That is particularly important as the WNBA continues to attract a much larger audience. More viewers means more cameras, more replays, more social media analysis, and far more scrutiny of controversial plays. A moment that might once have disappeared after the final whistle can now dominate the conversation for days. Carrington is experiencing that reality firsthand. The Sophie Cunningham incident became a major talking point. Then the new incidents involving Cecilia Zandalicini and Tiffany Hayes brought the issue back almost immediately. And that creates pressure on Carrington herself. At some point, the most effective way to change the conversation is not through social media arguments. It is through what happens on the court. If Carrington continues playing elite defense while avoiding unnecessary contact, the narrative can change. If the controversial incidents continue, the criticism will become harder to dismiss. That is not necessarily because every play proves malicious intent. It is because repeated outcomes eventually affect how people evaluate a player. There is also a larger issue involving the Chicago Sky. Carrington's current situation means the organization is now part of the conversation whether it wants to be or not. Every controversial moment involving one of its players eventually reflects back on the team. Coaches have to decide how they want their defense to be played. Teammates have to understand the boundaries. And the front office has to evaluate not only production, but also reputation and consistency. That does not mean the Sky should immediately turn against Carrington. It means the organization has to make sure that its defensive identity does not depend on crossing the line. There is another reason this matters. Young players are watching. The WNBA is becoming a bigger stage, and the way established players compete sends a message about what is acceptable. Physicality is part of professional basketball, but so is protecting opponents from unnecessary danger. Competition should be intense. It should not become reckless. And that distinction has to come from the players, the coaches, and the officials together. As for Carrington, there is still plenty of time to change the narrative. She does not need to become a completely different player. She does not need to stop being aggressive. She simply needs to make sure her aggression is controlled. Because there is a major difference between a defender who makes opponents uncomfortable and a defender who repeatedly becomes the center of controversy because of physical contact. One creates respect. The other creates questions. And right now, Carrington is facing more questions than she probably wants. The most important thing is that viewers should judge the footage carefully. Not every contact is intentional. Not every foul is dirty. Not every accusation on social media is accurate. But at the same time, repeated controversial plays should not automatically be dismissed either. The best conversation is somewhere in the middle. Look at the footage. Listen to the official ruling. Consider the context. And then decide whether the punishment and the defensive behavior match the standards the league claims to enforce. Because ultimately, this isn't just about whether fans think Sophie Cunningham was right or whether DJonai Carrington was wrong. It's about what kind of basketball the WNBA wants to promote. Physical? Absolutely. Competitive? Without question. But controlled, consistent, and safe? That has to be part of the equation too. And the next time Carrington steps onto the court, almost everyone watching will be paying attention. Not just to how many points she scores, not just to how many steals she records, but to how she defends. Because after everything that has happened, the next controversial play won't be viewed as just another moment. It could become the moment that finally determines whether this entire controversy fades away or becomes a defining part of DJonai Carrington's reputation. So now the question is yours. After watching all of these plays, do you think DJonai Carrington is simply an extremely aggressive defender who sometimes gets caught in bad situations? Or has this physical style finally crossed the line? The Sophie Cunningham incident was serious enough to result in a flagrant 2 and an ejection. Then, only days later, 2 more controversial plays put Carrington right back in the spotlight. That doesn't automatically prove intent, but it does explain why so many fans are demanding a closer look. What do you think the WNBA should do from here? Should officials simply continue judging every play individually? Or should the league take the overall pattern into consideration? Drop your opinion in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of the biggest WNBA controversies, player reactions, and moments everyone is talking about, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story may not be finished yet, and the next game could change the entire conversation.